People on site, if you'd like to grab a seat, that would be fantastic. We'll be going live very shortly. Thank you. Good evening and welcome to this Thriving Families Seminar brought to you by St Johns Maroubra. Whether you're joining us online or whether you're here at church, we welcome you. Whether you're a teenager or someone who cares for teenagers, we welcome you, and we hope that tonight's session will prompt some really fruitful and honest conversations for you. My name is Garth. I'll be hosting tonight. I'm a regular member of the 9 a.m. service, and I'm also a teacher by day. And in that role, I know for sure the importance of the topic which we approach tonight, which is sex education in a sexualized cyber world. This is a topic which is fraught with lots of misinformation, with confusion and stereotypes, and wondering who's responsible for what. And to help clear this up, we have with us tonight our guest speaker, Patricia Weerakoon. Patricia is a medical doctor from Sri Lanka. She's an academic, sexologist and writer. She's an evangelical Christian. She retired in 2012 from the University of Sydney after directing an internationally renowned graduate program in sexual health to pursue her passion, writing and speaking. Her writing and speaking brings together her enthusiasm for sex and her love for the glory of God. Her non-fiction books, which I've read many, are gold standard guides for sex of all ages, highly recommended. As a sexologist, she has translated her passion to bring good holistic sexual health to all people into practical sex education, sex research and sex therapy. She is a recognised media presence and a popular public speaker and social commentator in Australia. Patricia, are you there with us?
I am.
Wonderful. Thank you for your time this evening. You're going to share a presentation with us, after which you're going to make yourself available for questions and answers, which I think is a very brave thing. Congratulations. So to those...
happy to be with you.
Thank you. To those in the audience, both at church and at home, you'll have the opportunity to ask questions. We'll have a number up later on to text the questions. So as you're listening, please be thinking of some good questions that you can ask Patricia. Patricia, I'm allowed to ask you one question to start with by way of introduction before you start your presentation. My question is this: sexologist. It's not a career choice that you normally hear of. I only know one other sexologist. Most people want to grow up and be a teacher or a plumber or a computer programmer or something like that. How did you end up in your profession?
I actually kind of drifted into it. I did my medical degree in Sri Lanka, and I did my postgraduate study in Hawaii. There I was working with a professor who was at that time, we're talking 1980, one of the world's best known researchers in the area of gender. And that's the time I really recognized how wonderfully interesting the area was. But at the same time, I was worshiping in a wonderful evangelical Baptist church. And I was able to bring what I call my twin passions of God and sex together. After that, there was no looking back.
I love that. Your two passions of God and sex. Well, we're really looking forward to benefiting from your years of learning and wisdom. So I'll let you proceed with the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be with you, those of you in church and those online. So just give me a moment while I get on to share screen and we will get going. Okay, so I should be done in about 35 minutes, and after which we will have time for Q&A. I'm happy for you to ask me any questions, whether or not we actually are covering them in the talk today. So I'm happy to cover any aspect of sexology, sexuality, gender, parenting. Hey, even if you want to ask me about your married life and your sex life, I'm more than happy to answer any questions, time limited, of course. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about what does it mean to be a parent, a grandparent, a teacher, actually anyone in church. Every child in church is your child. And it's really important that we understand this. So how do we parent, whether you're a biological parent or whether you're a carer, children in this sexualized cyber world? So, firstly, who are these kids? We talk of Gen Z and Gen Alpha. Gen Z are your kind of teenagers and young adults. Your Gen Alphas are absolutely fascinating. These are the kids who were born in 2010 or after. Now, 2010 was the year that the iPad was launched, Instagram was launched, and app was the word of the year. So your Gen Alphas, so this is kids 12 and under, have grown up immersed in a cyber world. So have the Gen Zs, but more so your little ones. They will reach for the iPhone rather than a rattle or any toy. This is their world. So today, what I want to talk to you about is your kids' virtual immersion in a sexular culture. I'm using that word deliberately. You might think it's a spelling mistake, but actually it's not. Your kids are growing in a sexular culture with a very vulnerable developing brain. This is a lethal combination unless you are there to guide them. This is so important that we understand. So I want to talk about the virtual immersion, sexual culture, developing brain, and then give you some tips for the talk. Finally, I want to pick a few hot topics, gender, porn, and sexuality, and give you the science behind it and land as Christians on what has God got to say. Has the Bible got a better narrative for you and your children? So let's get started. Firstly, I said that your kids are immersed in the cyber world, a virtual world. This is just research from UK, but you can see there's a significant association with the amount of time spent on social media and anxiety and depression. This is done with teens, and there's similar research. I couldn't find quite as nice a graph for Australia, but similar research coming out for Australia. It matters how long kids spend on social media. And it is a source of anxiety. Why is this? What actually is happening? Many things, but one of the things, and I'll talk to you again about it, is the vulnerability of the developing brain. This is a very vulnerable time for your children from early childhood to about the mid-20s. And that's the time they are being bombarded with the social media. It does a couple of things. One is the culture that social media presents them with, especially girls, especially Instagram. And you can see there how the anxiety level for girls rises almost exponentially. Because on Instagram, on TikTok, they spend time following influencers and seeing what friends have up there and the comparison of themselves and that perfect image that has to be created. And if you get lots of likes, then you're so proud. But what if you don't get those likes? Then you're sad and insecure. The influencer effect. And since almost all of these social media, and I just listed some, but almost all, and even I didn't even put video games on that list, but all of them lead to chat rooms. Chat rooms are a gateway to what we call the dark web, the underbelly. And in this underbelly are predators and pornography. And now the gender chat rooms. Your children get on the web and put in a question, maybe something even as simple as, I don't like my body, or I don't like my breast. And immediately you'll find that they're channeled into some chat room of transgender discussion. So we even have words for it. It's called social contagion, when whole groups of kids get involved in this kind of crazy social media, caught up in the social media crazes. TikTok especially sets up challenges and the peer pressure to be involved. How can you help them? Now, I can't do a lot here. We don't have the time. One of our books called Talking Sex by the Book has an appendix which gives you some guidance there. But let me just give you a few pointers. You need to help your children understand the untruths, the worldview that underlies most of the social media. The worldview that is about comparison and drawing them in to that particular site. And you need to help them understand their vulnerability, how their brains are so susceptible. And even more importantly, talk and teach them the truth about everything. And we'll be talking about this everything in a moment. Be what we call a social media mentor. Now, a mentor walks with the child. So you can't say that these things are beyond me. You can't. You have to walk with the child. You have to know what's on their phone. We call this having an open phone policy. If of course, you're actually till they're 13, so your Gen Alphas shouldn't be on Instagram or Facebook or TikTok or Snapchat under 13. But even if they are, you must know what apps they have on their phone. If they don't want to show you, then it should not be on their phone. Have an open phone policy. And very strongly now, it is recommended even for 5 and 6 year olds, never too young, to have a family, what is called technology agreement or social media agreement. Now, I want to just give you one website that is really useful here. It's easy to remember. It's the Australia site, esafety.gov.au. esafety.gov.au. Right now, I can't access chat while I'm doing it, but the moderator wants to put that on the chat or into your chat box. That would be useful. esafety, one word, .gov.au, Australian site, excellent resources. So this is the immersion, the water your kids are swimming in. You need to know what it is. You need to know the temperature of the water and what's happening. And you are the ones who can be their guide. Why? Because of this desire-driven individualistic culture your children are growing up in and you are living in too. It's a culture that tells them you have to look inward into yourself, and I look inward to my feelings and find my authentic self. And once I find my authentic self, then I need to have these desires that I have identified met. And that's the only way I can be happy and content. It's about me and my desires. So we have a culture of aggressive selfishness where sex and sexual activity has become a toy, a commodity for personal pleasure. I mean, many of you may be aware, I think it was last year or year before, when there was this whole news items on the rape culture in schools and even in universities, the normalization of sexting, sharing pictures of body parts, of pornography, which we will return to later. it has become a toy, a commodity, something that is worthless. And the very body that God's given us has become a malleable object to use according to our desires. This is the foundation of transgender ideology. And to make this really dangerous, it's so self-centered that if you don't agree with me, and if you don't not just recognize my desires, but if you do not affirm and celebrate my desires, you are evil and a bigot, and you will be cancelled. This, in a nutshell, is the culture your kids are growing up in. So they're immersed in a virtual social media that is presenting them with this message. And they are in a time from babyhood to the mid-20s where the brain is in a state of very rapid development. Two things. One is there is very rapid development, like a rewiring happening very rapidly, reforming the connections between cells and the pathways that connect. For you biologists, synapses, axonic connections. These are changing rapidly from childhood to the mid-20s. Now, what drives this? Of course, it's biological, but, and this is really important, into the brain will affect the wiring. Your brain works on especially at that time, at all ages, that's what we mean by neuroplasticity. The brain works on a use it or lose it principle. So what you put in the brain will affect the wiring. In Philippians 4:8, the Apostle Paul says, whatever is true and noble and right and pure and lovely, admirable, excellent, praiseworthy, think about these things. Every time I read that, I think, gee, he sure knew about neuroplasticity, because what you wire your brain. That's the first point. Very vulnerable brain. So what's social media putting? What's the culture putting in? What are their peer group kids in the school talking about? Gender, porn, sexuality. What are they? What's being fed in? Do you know? Have you got your finger on it? Second thing, what we call developmental dissonance. Around just reaching puberty, when the sex hormones kick in, the emotional brain erupts like a volcano. It's a quick maturation. That's when they seek independence. For those of you who've got teenage kids, or if you're a teenager listening, that's the time when you go from, mommy's little possum to just, let me go. I don't want you holding my hand. Don't you dare hug me. I want to be somebody of my own. A search for independent identity. You can see how that time, if you are not guiding them, can make them so vulnerable to the transgender ideology of their peers and of social media. Because they are vulnerable. They are searching for an identity and they want it fast. Quick rewards. The reward system is very sensitive, what we call the dopamine system. I want now system. And therefore they take risks and they want, especially when the friends are sort of geeing them on. And of course, the interest in sex. Now, this has to happen. It's part of growing up. But the problem is that the executive brain, kind of the brain up here in the frontal parietal lobes of the brain, the control brain doesn't mature till the mid-20s. So what have we got? When I speak to young people, if you're a teenager listening in, your brain is like a red Ferrari on steroids with the accelerator to the floor, hardly any brake pedal, and no GPS. You're just shooting along. Now, parents, carers, grandparents, you are the GPS. You are the one. You are the one who can help them develop the self-control. You are the one who can guide that runaway red Ferrari. You are the one who can guide their development of identity. You are the one to whom they must be able to turn when they've done something, tried something. Of course they must. Kids must get out. They must take those risks. Part of growing up. But you must be the one who's there to help them. And so I want to and I've got that Teen Sex by the Book up there, because just want to tell you that in Teen Sex by the Book, and we're in the 3rd edition now, we talk quite in detail about this control brain and the whole neuroplasticity. So if you want more information, it's a useful book to get it from. Now, this is something I want to just very briefly talk to you and tell you that if you are interested, our book, Talking Sex by the Book, is a book that really goes into the how-to of parenting in terms of every age group, like under 5s, 5 to 10, 10 to 15, over 15, on every topic of like gender, porn, sex, every topic really. But I just want to give you this overall, what we call authoritative parenting. Authoritative parenting is a mix of best practice, really. And I have said there, it's a team activity. Authoritative parenting is a combination of dad and mom. And if you're a single parent, it's really good to have others in the church helping you in that parenting process. It's, the famous old adage, it takes a village to nurture a child, is still true, except that now we say it takes a community of church to nurture that child. Just very quickly running through, I have my 5 A's, and we talk a lot about it in detail in the book. Affection. Affection, love is spelled T-I-M-E. Time. When kids are interviewed, one of the things they say is that parents don't spend time with them. It's so important that you find the time to spend with your child and be responsive and connected. Affirmation. Be there when they're searching for identity, to point them towards a Christ focus rather than a world-focused identity. And be the one who's always the one go-to person when they want advice. Otherwise, it will be Google, it will be TikTok, it will be Instagram, it will be Facebook, who knows, or Tumblr, or Reddit, chat rooms. If you are not the one, they will go somewhere else. So be unashamed in talking about biblical truths on sex and marriage. Don't just speak it, also model it. Model good friendship. Your kids are growing up in a world where sexuality takes center stage, and non-sexual intimate friendships are almost non-existent. Show it in your life. But having given the love and the affirmation and the advice, you are the authority figure. And have a balance of that too. Obedience to God and parents, and self-control, a fruit of the Spirit. Help them from the time they are really little to develop that self-control and keep them accountable. Clear, consistent boundaries. Boundaries, whether it be on social media use, but boundaries expressed in grace and forgiveness. Now, I've only gone through it very, very briefly. So please, if you want more, do grab a copy of Talking Sex. It's available at Kurong, and it'll give you much more information. Happy to take questions on this later. Now, some parents are all affection and just permit kids to do what they want. That's permissive. I don't think any of you would be that. But At the other end, some of our subcontinental Asian parents can be what we call authoritarian. That is, do as I say and don't even question. Some of us grew up like that. But so you need to maintain what we call authoritative, a good mix of all of them. Again, I told it's just a very brief outline. Now, we're getting into sex now. What are the barriers to sex education? Why do some parents actually, or maybe all parents, find this so difficult to be able to do the sex education thing? Why is it? Things. The commonest is, I am too embarrassed. How do I talk to my child about, I don't know, masturbation or penis or whatever? How do I say it? I am too embarrassed. It is okay to be embarrassed. It is okay to tell your child, we need to talk about this. I'm not too comfortable. It is important we talk. Secondly, I just don't know what to do. I don't know how or what to say. That's why we've got resources. So go find good resources. I'm not saying my books are the only, it's not a sales pitch, but we do write for you. It's published by Anglican Publications. So, find good books, find good, reliable websites. esafety.com.gov is a really good site, but there will be good resources. So many myths. Sex communication is a green light to have sex. Wrong. All the research says that once you talk to your children, they actually take more care and they're less risk-taking and they put off having sex. Secular research. They actually put off having sex till they're older. So talking to them is extremely important. Another myth. Oh, my kids are too young. Never in kindy. And don't wait till you are asked. This is reactive. You got to be the one who gives the start of the discussion. Why? Because you must show, yes, you're embarrassed, but that you have worked through it and that you are brave enough to have the conversation. And another one I want to briefly touch on is that parents feel afraid that if once I've taught my child this, then, other parents are going to think I'm really bad for teaching them sex. And just one quick little side story, anecdote here. I did a talk like this, and then the next time I met a parent of a very young child, primary school, the teacher called her and said, your son said in the playground that he has a penis. And this wise mother said, well, don't the other boys have penis too? And then, of course, she talked to the son and said, maybe, there's an appropriate time to be discussing your genitals. So it's okay. It is okay to teach your children the right words and the right thing. Don't be afraid that, because other parents are not doing it, it makes you somehow bad or whatever. Okay, that's the barriers. Now, some of the nitty-gritty. When should you start talking? It is never too early. There was a time when I started after retirement 10 years ago, when I would say, just before puberty, 7, 8, no. Then we said, you've got to start in mid-primary. Now we tell parents, do not send your child to primary school without having the conversation. Why? Increase of child-on-child abuse in primary schools. Primary school kids being exposed to pornography. Average age of first exposure to pornography in Australia, 10 years and dropping. And kids being indoctrinated in transgender ideology in primary schools, books being read to them that teach them that they are not what their biology. Here's what now, this was actually from a Canadian school that I read this morning on Twitter, where kids are being taught, your mommy and daddy made up, well, not made up, but your mommy and daddy decided to call you a girl or a boy when you were born. But only you know who you are, and you can decide who you are. It's not what your parents said you were or the doctor said you were. In other words, biology doesn't matter. You can choose who you are. Your kids are being indoctrinated in this. You need to get in before that. So, never too early. And of course, very important, start off by talking about the importance of the body and the body parts and the correct names for the body parts. Please, your sons have a penis and and scrotum. Your girls have vagina and vulva. You don't have to mention the clitoris till much later. But you must use the right words. Conversations, we already talked about it. Be proactive, but also be ready to be reactive and be aware of the conversations. A kid comes and asks you something. Ask them, where did you hear it? What do you know? And then explain it. So, where did you hear it? What do you know? And then explain. I mean, a little boy, little girl comes and asks you, what's oral sex? Or what's homosexuality? What's a lesbian? Where did you hear it? What do you know? And then explain it. So that kind of question becomes a teachable moment. And gospel opportunities. When you're reading the Bible with your kids, don't skip over the hard stories. Maybe you come across the rape stories or, some sexualized stories. Don't overlook those. Use them as gospel opportunities, especially with the pre-pubertal and the pubertal and teenagers. And it's not about one talk. Drip feed dialogue. Keep the conversation going. Television, YouTube, what are you watching? What did you watch? What are you talking about in school? Driving them to the school or sports. Use the opportunities and use the resources. Above all, role model and share your attitudes and values. So the when, the how, but now the what. I want to we can go on forever, but I want to just introduce 3 important aspects that you really have to talk about. One is identity and the body in this world of transgender ideology, dealing with pornography and sexuality. So we've done the sort of back work. Now I'm going fairly fast. Hopefully you have a PDF of these slides. Transgender ideology, and this is covered in Teen Sex, but the Birds and Bees by the book is what I really would recommend for the little ones because it has one book on understanding gender. Biological sex. This is something that you need to understand and your children need to understand. Sex is determined at conception when sperm and ovum meet. Observe, the mums here will know that during pregnancy, observed, and only confirmed at birth. Your children will be told that they've been assigned a sex. That's a fallacy. Sex is not assigned. It is determined in the uterus. That's biology. Now, express your gender, your sex is called gender expression. So masculine boy who behaves in a feminine way, those days we might have called them sissies, which is not a girlish boy, is actually a girl. And a little girl who is a more sort of lie. If you have a child who is what we call gender non-conforming, it is okay. See that. So be very aware of that. Then we have sexual orientation. Are you attracted to? Who are you erotically attracted to? Now again, your kids are growing up in a culture where they are bullied or if you like you're a boy and you're a bit feminine, oh, you're so gay. It's become such a joke. And so we need to be aware of that your kids are being teased. Now, any questions you want, I do know we have to move on, so I don't want to spend a lot of time here, but I'm happy to take questions. The fourth category is this subjective, visible thing of who you are. There's no science. There's nothing called a boy brain in a girl body. There's no. See, for most people, this is congruent and there's peace and harmony in life. There will always be that is given. Now, I'm not going through all the Bible references, but you will know these. Created by God, male and female, beautifully complementary, coming together in marriage, chosen, known. So important for us to do this. Discuss puberty. It's like a sickness that can be blocked if they don't like it. Discuss stereotype in macho or that cute pornified image of a girl. You do not have to be that. Discuss these. Now, moving dopamine, falling in love. Remember, dopamine makes you dopey. Falling in love. Think back when you fell in love, parents. You were dopey. So that is strong emotions. But sexual intimacy is a binding act. Different chemicals, oxytocin, vasopressin, cause two people to form like super glue. Bonds keep stimulating, it gets numb. And therefore you need more and more and more. And the frontal control lobes actually shrink. Very quick, kids can get sucked in. The teen brain is about 5 to 6 times more sensitive to pornography. Remember, what you put in the brain will affect the wiring. And it's about 5 to 6 times more vulnerable to getting addicted. So, moving on. Okay, so is it any wonder that the Bible gives us a handle with care warning? My dear parents and carers, talk to your children. Development of self-control in a world that says, follow your heart. We need to teach them that the heart is deceptive, that we can guide them. And above all, the Lord, the Bible gives us good guidance, that we have a better narrative. 3 times in Song of Songs, we read, do not arouse or awaken love till the right time. It is a powerful, powerful feeling. But what you do with your feelings is always a choice. So you flee from sexual immorality. Teach your children to not with porn, to not get sucked into the transgender ideology, to always come back to you with the question. Now, how do you do that? You start early and you talk often and you stay receptive and you open communication so that they're comfortable, so that when they have a concern, they come to you. And if you're anxious, get the resources, read it, share it with your children. The Bible tells us, flee. Don't just dabble with it. Teach and model self-control. Sex education else is caught even more than taught. So you need to be aware that your children are constantly watching you. So don't take a chance. Watch your behavior. How do you relate? How do you, if you're watching this and your husband and wife, how are you responding to each other? It is okay for your children to see you kissing at the kitchen sink. They may go, oh, mom, but it's okay. They'll remember that intimacy. It's okay if your little ones run in while you're having sex. It's a teachable moment. Not at that moment, maybe, And you might want to put a lock and talk about private moments between mom and dad, but don't freak. They're not going to be traumatized for life because they saw you making love. If you explain to them that it is what mom and how mommy and daddy show each other that they love each other, it is okay. So let's pull this together so that we have lots of time. Whoops. Why am I not moving forward? Okay. Remember, in conclusion, there is no perfect parent. I parented one, and he's now 48, but I can look back and think of all the things I did wrong. You know, the Apostle Paul writing to Timothy says, Christ Jesus came into the world to save sinners. Shown mercy, he says, and Christ Jesus might display his immense patience. My dear parents, carers, grandparents, we worship a God who forgave us and showed immense patience. You are ambassadors of Christ in your children's lives. You can show that forgiveness. You can show that immense patience to your children. You can show, you can reflect the love of Christ in your children's lives. And while you're doing that, make sure you talk to them about sex and their body. It's so important that you do that. Very briefly, let me tell you a little bit about the resources we have. In Sex by the Book was the first book we wrote. It's for your teenagers plus. And it's a kind of book you give them and they throw it away and then they go when you're not watching and pick it up again and read it. And it covers all the things we talked about: pornography, gender, sexuality, dating, mating, the whole lot. And in much more detail, it's reference, it's science-based and reference. So it kind of appeals to the teen brain. Growing Up by the Book is a book that we strongly recommend for the kind of pre-pubertal, because puberty ages are dropping. And it's really important that our kids know that puberty is a good thing. Because in our transgender ideology, it's like if you don't like your puberty, oh, you must be the other sex. So we can put a pause button. You cannot. You cannot pause puberty and then remove the pause. To be talking to our primary schoolers. It's 6 books, 3 starter books, Me and My Family, Me and My Body, Me and My Brain, and 3 extension, learning about sex, learning about gender, and learning about pornography. We've got them in 6 books so that you can pick what you want. Talking Sex by the Book is what we wrote last, I think it was last year, beginning of last year. And the purpose is to give parents that confidence. Remember, are you embarrassed? Don't you know what to say? Hey, here's a book that gives you some guidance. And if you feel like you need to have a best sex for life as a couple, this best sex for life takes you from from engagement to the nursing home. I just realized Sunday is Mother's Day, so maybe this may be a good gift for Mother's Day. Just saying. And since I have so much of time on my hands, I like to do novel writing, creative writing, and those are 2 of my books, and my 3rd is being launched at the end of the year. That's my email for any of you who can't get your questions answered, or maybe you want to ask me something that you don't feel you want to talk to everybody about. That's Kamalini, my second name, and my year of birth, 1947, @gmail.com. That's my website, which links to some of the videos, my video channel, which I did during lockdown. Haven't done any recently, and my Twitter handle. Okay, so that's where I'm going to stop, and I am going to stop sharing, and we can move on to Q&A. Did they get the PDF? Did people get the PDF?
I've got a thumbs up. The PDF was sent out.
Good.
Yes. And if you didn't get it, you can contact John Batten. Hey, thank you, Patricia. That was a great research-driven and biblically based presentation. Lovely and wide-ranging, and I feel like I've been given a bit of a kick in the butt, but also given some confidence about what needs to happen next. So thank you very much on behalf of the people watching at St John's. We do have time for questions, so thank you for making that time. If you were registered for the event, you will have received